Welcome back to What if the 1965 Lincoln penny sitting in your pocket, coin jar, or old family collection could be hiding a secret that turns an ordinary 1-cent coin into a collector's dream? Before you spend another 1965 penny, stop and look closely. A tiny detail in the date, the surface, the strike, the condition, or an unusual minting error could make the difference between a common coin and an exceptionally interesting collectible. And in today's video, we are exploring the 1965 Lincoln penny with a headline value of up to $605,000 in an extraordinary rarity scenario. Welcome back to Coin Seller Network, where we uncover the history, varieties, errors, and hidden clues that make old U.S. coins so fascinating. 1965 Lincoln penny. The 1965 Lincoln penny is one of those coins that can easily be overlooked. It is not an extremely old coin, and millions of Americans have probably handled one without thinking twice. But for collectors, the story behind this penny is much more interesting than its 1-cent face value suggests. The first thing to understand about the 1965 Lincoln cent is that it belongs to an important period in American coinage. During the 1960s, the United States Mint was dealing with major changes in the cost and availability of metals. Rising demand for coins, along with shortages of copper, silver, and other metals, created significant pressure on the nation's coinage system. The Lincoln cent itself continued to be produced, but the era surrounding 1965 was a fascinating period of transition in American minting. That historical background gives collectors another reason to study these coins carefully. Take a look at the front of the coin. You will see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his portrait is the inscription "In God We Trust." To the left is Liberty, while the date appears on the right side. Turn the coin over and you will see the Lincoln Memorial, surrounded by United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 cent. The design may look ordinary today, but this classic Lincoln Memorial reverse remained one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage for decades. Now here is where your investigation begins. Next, look for the mint mark. The 1965 Lincoln cent is notable because regular circulating cents from this period do not carry a traditional mint mark identifying Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. This is connected to the mint's temporary suspension of mint marks during the 1960s. That means if you find a 1965 cent without a mint mark, that is not automatically an error. In fact, it is exactly what you would expect from a normal 1965 circulating cent. This is an important lesson for new collectors. Something that looks unusual is not necessarily rare. A missing mint mark is only valuable as an error if the coin was supposed to have one under the circumstances being examined. Simply seeing no mint mark on a 1965 penny does not make it a six-figure coin. Now let's talk about condition. Condition can have a huge impact on collectible value. A heavily circulated 1965 penny may have scratches, discoloration, flattened details, and wear across Lincoln's portrait. A coin that spent decades protected from circulation may preserve much sharper details and original luster. When examining your coin, look closely at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and the lettering. On the reverse, inspect the Lincoln Memorial and the columns. Sharp detail can indicate stronger preservation. You should also look at the fields, which are the flatter areas surrounding the main design elements. Large scratches, stains, dents, or contact marks can affect a coin's grade. Another important factor is color. Copper-based Lincoln cents can develop different appearances over time. Collectors commonly classify copper coins by color categories such as brown, and red. A naturally preserved red Lincoln cent can be especially attractive to collectors when combined with strong strike quality and excellent overall preservation. But be careful when you see a bright red penny. A coin that has been artificially cleaned, polished, chemically treated, or altered may lose much of its collector appeal. Never assume that shiny automatically means valuable. Original surfaces are usually much more desirable than artificially brightened surfaces. Now we come to one of the most exciting possibilities: mint errors. A genuine mint error occurs when something unusual happens during the manufacturing process. Errors can involve the planchet, dies, striking process, or other stages of production. For example, an off-center strike can occur when the blank planchet is not properly positioned between the dies. This can leave part of the design missing and create a dramatic crescent-shaped blank area. Another possibility is a broad strike, where the coin is struck without being properly contained by the collar. The resulting coin can have an unusual shape or expanded appearance. There can also be die cracks, die chips, double design elements, clipped planchets, and other unusual characteristics. But once again, caution is essential. A damaged penny is not automatically an error. A coin that was bent, scratched, squeezed, heated, drilled, polished, or chemically altered after leaving the mint can look extremely unusual. Collectors distinguish genuine mint-made errors from post-mint damage. That distinction can mean the difference between an interesting curiosity and a valuable collectible. So if your 1965 penny looks strange, don't immediately try to fix it. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not scrape the surface. Instead, preserve the coin exactly as you found it and seek an opinion from a qualified numismatist or professional grading service. Now let's address the $605,000 figure. Could an ordinary 1965 Lincoln penny simply be worth $605,000? No. A normal circulated 1965 cent should not be described as a $605,000 coin. That figure should be understood as a headline value for an extraordinary hypothetical example involving exceptional rarity, a major authenticated error, unusual characteristics, exceptional condition, or a combination of factors that would attract serious collector attention. In other words, do not look at your 1965 penny and assume that the date alone makes it worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The real treasure is knowing how to identify what makes a particular coin different. Imagine finding a 1965 cent with an unusual mint-made error that has never been recognized in ordinary examples. Imagine that the error is dramatic, genuine, and professionally authenticated. Now imagine that the coin has survived for decades with remarkable preservation and has a documented history. That is the type of situation where a coin could become extremely desirable. But even then, a specific value cannot be guaranteed without professional examination and an actual market transaction. Coin values depend on rarity, condition, demand, authentication, provenance, and what collectors are willing to pay at a particular time. That is why responsible coin collecting is about evidence, not just exciting price claims. If you are searching through your own coins, start with simple steps. Separate your 1965 pennies from other dates. Use good lighting. Look at both sides. Examine the edge. Compare the coin with confirmed examples. If possible, use a digital scale and magnification. Take clear photographs of anything unusual. Pay special attention to the date and the overall strike. Look for design elements that appear doubled in a way that could indicate a genuine die variety or mint error. Do not confuse machine doubling or post-mint damage with true double dies. The more you learn, the easier it becomes to recognize the difference. Another reason the 1965 penny is interesting is its historical setting. This coin was produced during a period when Americans were experiencing major changes in everyday life, while the U.S. Mint was dealing with enormous pressure to keep enough coins in circulation. Everyday pocket change was becoming part of a much larger economic story. That means your 1965 Lincoln cent is not simply a piece of metal. It is a small piece of American history, and that is one of the best things about coin collecting. You don't always need an extremely old coin to find something fascinating. Sometimes a coin from the 1960s can tell you about changes in manufacturing, economics, technology, and American society. So the next time you find a 1965 Lincoln penny, don't throw it into a jar without looking. Check the date. Check the surfaces. Check the strike. Check for unusual characteristics. And remember that the absence of a mint mark on a 1965 cent is normal, not automatically an error. If you discover something genuinely unusual, preserve the coin and get it professionally evaluated before making any assumptions about its value. And if your example happens to be an exceptionally rare, authenticated piece with extraordinary characteristics, that is when the conversation can become much more interesting. Could a remarkable 1965 Lincoln penny ever be associated with a headline figure like $605,000? Only an extraordinary example and real-world market evidence could justify such a valuation. The vast majority of 1965 pennies are far more common. But that doesn't make the hunt any less exciting. Because the real thrill is not knowing that every penny is valuable. The thrill is knowing that you might discover something unusual among millions of ordinary coins. So check your old change. Search your coin jars. Look through inherited collections. Examine those forgotten rolls of pennies. And before you spend that 1965 Lincoln cent, take one more look. You may not have a $605,000 treasure, but you might have a fascinating piece of American history, a collectible in exceptional condition, or an unusual mint-made error that deserves a much closer examination. This is Coin Seller Network, and remember, never judge a coin by its face value alone. Sometimes the smallest details tell the biggest stories, and sometimes one tiny difference is exactly what makes a coin worth saving. What if a coin sitting unnoticed in your pocket, old coin jar, or collection could be worth an incredible $605,000? Before you spend another Lincoln penny, stop and take a close look. The 1982 Lincoln penny is one of the most fascinating modern U.S. cents ever produced, and certain versions can become highly desirable because of their date, mint mark, composition, condition, and especially their errors. Welcome back to Coin Seller Network, where we uncover the stories behind ordinary-looking coins that collectors search for around the world. Today, we are taking a deep look at the 1982 Lincoln penny and the features that could make one example dramatically more valuable than another. 1982 Lincoln penny. At first glance, the 1982 Lincoln cent may look like just another common penny. It carries the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, with the words "Liberty" and "I in God We Trust" surrounding his image, while the reverse displays the Lincoln Memorial. But 1982 was a major transition year in the history of the Lincoln cent, and that is exactly what makes this date so interesting to collectors. The United States Mint changed the composition of the Lincoln cent during 1982. For decades, pennies had primarily been made from a bronze composition containing copper. Rising copper prices eventually made producing copper-based cents increasingly expensive. As a result, the mint began transitioning to copper-plated zinc cents. This created multiple varieties of 1982 pennies, including both bronze and copper-plated zinc examples. That means the date alone is not enough to determine whether your 1982 penny is valuable. You need to investigate exactly which version you have. The first thing to check is the mint mark. Some 1982 cents were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, while others were produced at the Denver Mint and carry a small D mint mark. There were also San Francisco proofs. Different varieties and compositions can have very different collector interest. Now comes one of the most important details: weight. A traditional bronze Lincoln cent generally weighs around 3.11 grams, while the newer copper-plated zinc cents weigh around 2.5 grams. If you have a 1982 penny and a precise digital scale capable of measuring hundredths of a gram, checking its weight can be an important first step in identifying its composition. But remember, a worn or damaged coin can sometimes weigh slightly differently, so weight should be considered together with other evidence. This is where the 1982 Lincoln penny becomes especially exciting. Collectors recognize several major 1982 varieties, including large date and small date versions. These varieties can be difficult to distinguish at first, but experienced collectors examine the shape, spacing, and proportions of the numerals in the date. The two in particular can provide useful clues when comparing examples. If you have multiple 1982 pennies, placing them side by side under good lighting can make the differences easier to notice. But there is another factor that can dramatically change the value of any 1982 Lincoln cent: errors. Mint errors happen when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process. These mistakes can include double designs, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, missing details, wrong planchet strikes, and other unusual abnormalities. Genuine major mint errors can attract strong attention because they are created unintentionally during production and can be much scarcer than normal coins. However, this is where collectors need to be careful. Not every unusual-looking penny is a valuable error. Damage that happens after the coin leaves the mint can create scratches, bends, flattening, discoloration, or distorted lettering. These are usually considered damage rather than collectible mint errors. So if your 1982 penny appears strange, do not immediately assume it is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Instead, document the coin carefully, compare it with verified examples, and consider professional authentication when the potential value is significant. Condition is another major part of the story. A coin that has been heavily circulated may show scratches, discoloration, and wear across Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and the lettering. A high-grade, uncirculated example can look dramatically different. Collectors often pay close attention to original surfaces, sharp details, attractive color, and the absence of significant marks. For copper cents, color can also matter. Coins are commonly described by collectors as brown, red-brown, or red depending on their appearance and preservation. A beautiful red example with strong original luster can be much more desirable than an otherwise similar coin that has become dark or heavily worn. Now let's talk about the headline figure of $605,000. A value of $605,000 should not be treated as the normal market price for an ordinary 1982 Lincoln penny. That kind of figure represents an extreme hypothetical or exceptional scenario involving extraordinary rarity, condition, authentication, and collector demand. Most 1982 pennies are not worth anything close to that amount. The purpose of examining the $605,000 possibility is to understand why identifying rare varieties and genuine errors matters, not to suggest that every 1982 cent is a six-figure coin. Still, imagine finding an exceptionally rare 1982 cent with an unusual combination of characteristics. Perhaps it has a major authenticated mint error, an extremely scarce variety, outstanding preservation, and a documented provenance. That is when serious collectors and specialists may become interested. The best approach is simple. Never judge a coin only by its face value. Start with the date. Confirm that it is actually 1982. Then check the mint mark. Next, examine the date for variety characteristics. Weigh the coin carefully. Inspect the surfaces and edges under magnification. Look for unusual doubling, missing design elements, off-center strikes, abnormal lettering, cracks, or other features that appear to have occurred during the minting process. The edge can also provide useful clues. Because 1982 includes both bronze and copper-plated zinc cents, the color and appearance of the edge can sometimes help distinguish them, although weight and professional examination are more reliable. If you discover something unusual, avoid cleaning the coin. This is extremely important. Many beginners believe polishing an old penny will make it more attractive and valuable, but cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. Keep the coin in a safe holder and avoid touching the surfaces unnecessarily. Another smart move is to compare your coin with reputable numismatic references and auction records. If you believe you have a major rarity, professional grading and authentication can provide an independent assessment. Certification can be particularly important when a coin is being considered for a major sale. And remember, the story of the 1982 Lincoln penny is bigger than a single price tag. It represents a turning point in American coin production. It is a date that gives collectors the opportunity to study composition changes, mint varieties, errors, condition, and the evolution of the Lincoln cent. That is why collectors continue searching through old jars, inherited collections, rolls of pennies, and forgotten boxes of change. You could have dozens of 1982 pennies and find that most are ordinary. But one unusual example may deserve a much closer inspection. The difference could be hidden in a tiny mint mark, a subtle date variety, an unusual weight, an authentic mint error, or exceptional preservation. So before you toss that old 1982 penny into a spending pile, take a second look. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Check the weight. Study the date variety. Inspect the surfaces. Examine the edge. And if something looks genuinely unusual, do not clean it or alter it. Preserve it and have it evaluated by a qualified coin professional. This is Coin Seller Network, and our mission is to remind you that valuable discoveries do not always look valuable at first. The next time you see a 1982 Lincoln penny, remember that it comes from one of the most interesting transition years in modern U.S. cent production. While an ordinary example may be common, a rare and authenticated variety or major error could command substantially more attention, and in an extraordinary scenario, the value discussed in today's video could reach as high as $605,000. So check your change, search your coin jars, look through old collections, and most importantly, learn what you are looking at. Because sometimes the smallest coin in your collection can have the biggest story.